Welcome everyone back to the channel, and today is a continuation of my CompTIA CySA exam guide. We're still in Chapter 1, Cybersecurity Analyst 101, the basics, and today we're going to delve into penetration testing just a little bit. It's not going to cover the full scope like, say, for a Pen Test Plus exam, but just a general overview that you need to know for the exam, for the CompTIA CySA Plus exam to be exact. Without further ado, let's get straight into it. What is a penetration test? A penetration test is a controlled, authorized cybersecurity attack conducted by ethical hackers to identify and exploit vulnerabilities in a system, just like a real attacker would. The goal is to find weaknesses before malicious actors do so they can be fixed. Straight and simple. All right, what are the penetration test phases? So these phases consist of planning and scoping. That's where you're defining your goals and rules of engagement. Your recon, gathering open source intelligence or OSINT. Scanning and enumeration, identifying open ports, services, vulnerabilities. Exploitation, your attempt to gain access using the known vulnerabilities. Post-exploitation, you're assessing damage potential, data access, and privilege escalation. And you're reporting, you're documenting your findings, your risk levels, and the remediation recommendations. Why does this matter? So it's important, or penetration testing is important because it reveals the real-world security gaps. It validates the effectiveness of the defensive that you have already. It helps organizations meet compliance standards, such as the PCI DSS and NIST, especially with the PCI DSS. That's a very important one that may call for pen testing, or at least auditing. Enhances incident response readiness. Because if you know what your vulnerabilities are and you fix it, it will pretty much smooth over whatever incident response reaction that takes place. So what is pen test planning, right? So planning a penetration. Planning a penetration test is the first and most critical phase of the process. It defines the scope, rules, and objectives to ensure that the test is both effective and authorized, avoiding disruption and legal issues. And then we're going to go into the key elements of penetration testing, right? So the goals and objectives. What are we testing? This has to be laid out before anything starts, right? So are we testing, the network, the cloud, the web app? What do we want to learn? What is the goal of this? What is the objective? Next, the other element is defining the scope, right? So what is the breadth of what we're testing here? Do we need IP ranges? Do we need keys, certain crypto keys, if that's even possible? Applications, API, physical systems. Do we need, the devices that remote workers have? Do we need VPN access? What do we need? What are we allowed to test, to penetrate, right? Exclude sensitive systems if needed, right? So that's why I said, maybe not keys. They're probably going to give you the crypto keys, but you know what I'm saying? You're defining your wiggle room as a pen tester. Your rules of engagement, ROE, establishing test hours, the contact info, the safe words, the data handling procedures and limitations that are given by the organization that's giving you the green light to pen test them, right? Authorization. This is very, 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 very important, and this will come on this exam, and it also came on the pen test exam that I did earlier this year. So you need written approval for stakeholders. It's a legal requirement, right? There's no way, at least I think for sure in the real world, but also in the test, there's no way you can do a pen test without written approval, because if you don't, you are going to jail more than likely, right? Testing type, So is it a black box test? Is it a white box test? Is it a gray box test? So black box is pretty much you have no knowledge of the system that you're about to pen test, and it's almost mirroring what a hacker or a threat, like a malicious actor, would actually do, right? White box is like when you have certain permissions. When you have permissions, you have information about what you're pen testing and whatnot, and you have the go ahead. So you have all the information at your fingertips. Excuse me. And then gray box is a mixture of the two. You might have some information, some credentials, but not everything, right? So risk considerations, another key part of pen testing. So you're identifying systems that could crash production environments, backup plans, so stuff of that sort, right? And then your success criteria. What makes this test successful, right? Is it gaining access? Is it pivoting? Is it privilege escalation? Is it compromising this? Is it data exfiltration? You have to pretty much lay that out. What would make this pen test a success, right? Moving on. Deliverables. So deliverables is more or less what, both parties, or not even both parties, I would say more so the party that's being tested, they expect from you, right? So your statement of work is pretty much a written document that lays out what you're accomplishing. So in your planning phase and your scope, all that's going to be laid out. Your statement of work, like we're gonna look for this particular looking for these particular vulnerabilities on these particular systems, or we're gonna do this route, and our goal or success criteria is gonna be XYZ, boom, 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 and it's written out, right? And then the rules of engagement is gonna be given by your organization that you're hacking into or pen testing, and they're gonna be like, oh, you can't hack into this particular subnet because it has this sensitive data, or you can't hack into this server because it houses this particular data, blah, 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 or you can't hack into this particular area because, our third-party supplier has proprietary stuff in there or whatever, stuff like that, right? Your pre-test checklist, right? You need a checklist to make sure you're on the right steps that you're doing. And of course, one of the most important things, your signed authorization form, because if you do not have this, you will be going to jail as a pen tester. All right, moving on. Executing a penetration attack. Executing a penetration attack is the stage of a pen test where ethical hackers actively exploit vulnerabilities discovered during earlier phases, such as the recon and scanning phases, to determine how deep an attacker could go. This phase shows whether weaknesses are theoretical or real world, right? So the key activities during the actual execution is that you're exploiting vulnerabilities, so using your tools like Metasploit, SQL Map, Hydra, Nmap, stuff like that. Examples: SQL injection, buffer overflows, misconfigured services. Then, when you exploit those vulnerabilities, the next step in the execution of the attack, you're gaining access, right? So the initial compromise, you establish a foothold in the system or network. You're using default credentials, weak passwords, exploiting code, backdoors, etc., to gain that initial foothold. Then you privilege escalate. That means you're attempting to gain higher level access to the system or root of that particular endpoint. Then you exploit configurations or unpatchable vulnerabilities to further, escalate or get higher level access. Executing a penetration attack continued. So lateral movement. So after you privilege escalate, you're moving across the IT infrastructure. Excuse me, sorry about that. You're moving across the network infrastructure. So you're using harvested credentials, open shares, or remote executions. This is pretty much where you're pivoting, right? So you can pivot to another server. You could say like the pen testers, they are in a server or a network infrastructure in Canada, and then they pivot over to the server in New York or something like that. So that's what lateral movement is, right? And you establish persistence. So you leave backdoors, you leave a reverse shell so that you can exfil data, stuff like that. Well, that's more so what an actual hacker would do, but sometimes I would assume that a pen tester could perhaps attempt to do a reverse shell to see if it's doable, but they'll leave a backdoor of some sort just to have the door open. So if they need to, again, as I said, exfil data or do something else, they can, right? So they can easily get that foothold back, right? Then data collection, as I mentioned before, exfilling data, all that good stuff. And then the tools, as I mentioned before, your Metasploit, your Nmap, Burp Suite, Bloodhound, Mimikatz. So just to go through it, because I know my little picture is probably blocking it. So Metasploit is used for exploitation framework, is exploitation framework. Burp Suite is for your web application attacks. Nmap, one of the most famous ones, is for post exploitation scanning. There's a lot of heavy lifting in terms of scanning for IP addresses and whatnot. Bloodhound, Active Directory, privilege escalation, and your Mimikatz is for your credential harvesting. Communicating penetration test results. So when you're communicating your pen test results, it involves delivering a clear, well-organized report that outlines what vulnerabilities were found, how they were exploited, what impact was demonstrated, how to fix them. The goal is to educate stakeholders and prioritize remediation and improve security posture without overwhelming non-technical audiences. So I think this is where the rubber meets the road in terms of cyber or IT professionals communicating their issues to the other part of the organization, right? Because a lot of people don't understand IT, much less understand the cyber security world. So it's very important that you put in layman's language, very easy to, break it down stupid, pretty much, to break it down to a grade school level to where people can understand this is what's going on in your organization. These are the weaknesses. This is where we need to fix them so that your organization can continue making profits. You know what I mean? So moving on. So these are the key components of a pen test report. Executive summary. So that's your high-level overview for leadership that was tested, the key risks and business impacts. Your scope and methodology, what systems were in scope and how testing was conducted. Your findings, each vulnerability is listed with severity, evidence, and exploitability. Your risk ratings, CISSP score or custom severity scale. Your proof of concept, screenshots, payloads, and steps taken to demonstrate exploit. Recommendations, clear actionable remediation steps for each issue. And your conclusion, your final thoughts, and prioritization guidance. Can't speak today. Why does this matter? Again, it goes back to translating your technical risk into business language, and just basic language that stakeholders and CEOs and other execs can understand. It builds trust within the stakeholders. It helps organization prioritize remediation and supports compliance and audit requirements. Review. So we went over pen testing in a very light way. A very important part of being a cybersecurity analyst, because you might work with red team or you might be in a purple team where you are doing some pen testing and stuff like that, right? So we went over basically what are pen tests, the steps, the process of execution, and also reporting, and how that and the overall reasons why we report, why we do pen testing at all, right? Why do we even do this? Why would we even hack into our own stuff, right? And overall, this is just basically so we find our own faults before the bad guys do, right? So that's all I have for today. And if you guys have any questions or concerns, leave it in the comment section below. And with that being said, I can't wait to see you guys in the next video. And that's all I have for today. Peace out.